Healing your inner child. That's the topic for today's conversation between myself, Pierre-Etienne Vanier. I'm the founder of the Healing Studio Online and mind body practitioner specialized in stress management and trauma recovery. And my colleague Amari Dior, who's a pain management coach. You can find her on Instagram at Body Armor Wellness. And I get a sense that today is going to actually be more of a part one of this conversation around healing the inner child, because there's quite a lot to share. So make yourself comfortable, grab something to drink, to stay hydrated while Amari is joining to discuss healing inner child. And here she is. Welcome.
Hi, good morning. Good afternoon over there.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you doing?
Doing well, doing well. I'm excited about today's topic.
Me too.
That's, as a reminder here, I let you put it in the chat if that's okay. Healing the inner child, as always, before we get into this conversation, remember for our audience here that every Tuesday, 8 to 8:30, between 20 and 30 minutes, we get into conversation with Amari for us to on a variety of topic around pain management, emotional, physical pain, around healing, around different types of practices and approaches. And so before we do anything, before we go anywhere, let's just take a couple of nice slow deep breaths here. It's an invitation to me, to you here, if you're watching this video and all you do is take these breaths with us, well, your body will be grateful. So take one more. And exhale. Some of you might have a long day. You may be starting the day. Regardless, you're in the right place. Healing the inner child. So, where do we start? Let's start maybe with, what do we understand? What is the inner child? Maybe what is healing the inner child? That seems like a fair question to ask. Let's start with the inner child, shall we?
Yeah.
And then what it means. Well, you want to give it a stab before
Yeah.
and then I'll go.
You know, this was a topic that I feel like has been coming up a lot just within the groups that I'm in, and even with clients. And a lot of times, inner child is something that it's who we are and what we experienced as a child. And oftentimes that society will believe, or I believed for a very long time, that I was a child that was back then. I've survived. I've gotten through that. It's not affecting me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Or it wasn't a big trauma. It wasn't a big T trauma. It was just something that happened. And I just, classic brushing it under the rug and minimizing certain situations. And a lot of times with this inner child that is crying out to us for healing when we're in pain as adults, this child has gone through, or I'm sorry, has seen maybe community violence or just family instability, or maybe they had bullying or just didn't fit in, or just seemed there are all these little nicks and crannies that happen when we're a child and when we're growing and when we're trying to understand the world around us and the world outside of us, and then just who we are and who we are becoming. And in that process, the inner child is created, and the inner child carries on with us throughout our lives, whether you're 19, whether you're 29, whether you're 89. That inner child still cries out to us and tells us, no, this is something that's familiar to us. I'm going to tell you that what you're going through right now is a trigger to what I went through when I was small, when I was that inner child. And so um, that to me is the inner child as far as how it speaks to me, and as far as where I am right now in my healing journey and trying to understand who I am and what healing needs to be done.
Yeah, and there's quite a few things that you said that, resonated with me. And the first, I think, is a reminder to myself and to everybody here that that inner child is always there, and it's going to influence everything you do, everything I do, how I educate my kids, how I engage with my wife, with my husband, with my partner, and so on, with my parents. I think that's something that I want to say I was probably in denial about for a long time. Um, and I've heard a lot of people, particularly men, telling me, I'm a grown man. And there's a really, for the Key and Peele fans, I'm a big Key and Peele fans. There's a hilarious skit of like, I'm a grown ass man, and that's, for the reference, check it out, people, if you like Key and Peele. And and for me, that's what I see. I see, and here I'll talk about men particularly, because I feel like, women are doing the work traditionally, um, but I feel like so often we see grown-ass men who are behaving like toddlers. They're behaving like kids. And I don't mean that in a good way. It's great to connect to your playfulness, to your creativity. That inner kid is there, right? As a source of joy and freedom. And that's when you start to play. And there's so many beautiful things coming from that inner child, when that inner child is acknowledged and loved and protected. Um, and yet let's understand that as we grow older, as we grow up in a perfect world, I'm evolving. I'm integrating all these parts of me. I'm healing all these parts of me, and I'm constantly evolving. And yet we don't live in a perfect world. We live in a world when shit happens. And so every now and then, what's going to happen is that there's going to be a lot of stress. There's going to be something that's traumatic to your nervous system. And then what happens? That part of me gets frozen in time, doesn't
Mm,
get to develop. And because it doesn't get to develop, well, I'm still going to have to deal with it a year later, 5 years later, decades later,
yeah.
right? And that's why I think today, at times, and at least I'll just speak for myself, just out of, honesty here, at times I don't respond as a 43, 44-year-old man. I find myself responding really in a way that may be either immature or I'm over responding. And then when I check myself, I'm like, what's happening here? Who's this? Here is my inner child. Here's my
Mm.
little Pierre Etienne, who's like, well, oh yeah, you don't want to give me love? I'm not gonna give you love, right? Or whatever, right? Like whatever that is, that immature response. Um, and so it's it's important for me, and I think for anybody walking that path of wanting to heal, so that we can be, better parents, better spouses, better partners, better sons and daughters, and so on and so forth. To understand that healing that inner child, as far as I see it, is reclaiming that sense of peace, finding or reclaiming that sense of peace, that sense of joy, that sense of safety
Hmm.
in communication with that inner child, right?
Yeah.
It's saying, oh, I see you right now, and like you said, I'm listening to you, I'm giving you a voice, um, when appropriate, right? Obviously,
Yeah.
but but how many of us, right, or noticing this pattern and are not acknowledging that, well, a lot of these patterns are rooted in childhood trauma,
Right.
right? And so, and the last thing I want to say here is that if you're like, "Man, I don't know about this childhood trauma, I moved on," just look up. the ACE study, Adverse Childhood Experiences, which I think
Mm-hmm.
is relevant to that conversation today, which is a big study. Just look it up. Um, and and that study, surprise, surprise, is telling us that, well, all the challenges I've been through while I was, what my body, my brain, my nervous system, my whole being was developing. Well, all these challenges will have an impact on my relationship, my health,
Yeah.
my behaviors, right? And so the more I go through adverse experiences as a kid, therefore the more that inner child gets, right, gets frozen and unable to
Mm-hmm.
express, to express itself in positive ways. What's happening is that I'm more likely to deal with addiction. I'm more likely to have cardiovascular issues. I'm more likely to have abandonment issues, codependence, and so on and so forth. The list is long. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that if you've been through hard times as a kid, well, you're destined to have a shitty life as an adult. It's not what we're saying. But we're saying here, I'm saying that if you don't deal with it, if you don't deal with it, as in if you don't heal, if you don't integrate, if you don't turn inwards, which what healing is really about, right? It's not
Yeah.
about controlling other people. It's about turning inwards and saying, what hurts, right? This, we talk about pain a lot here. And so what is that pain that made me respond in a way that is not aligned with my values, with the
Mm.
person I want to be, or the person I pretend to be, right? And then, oh, that's actually the real me, right? That's still in pain. And so for us to walk that path, as in, I feel like is a fascinating journey. And I know for me, it's brought a lot of challenges, but it's brought a lot of healing to engage in that journey.
Yeah. Ah, that's so
Um,
beautiful.
Sense here?
Yeah, that makes total sense. And yeah, that child, that inner child will continue to show up if we don't have the healing because I was just talking to my mom about this and I'm just like the child as a child I had no capacity to understand what the world was, who I was and what coping mechanisms to give myself um, or even truly understand my values and how that would affect
Yeah.
me in the way that I live my life today as an adult. And I was telling her, I was like, everyone goes through something in childhood. Like, it doesn't have to be a big T trauma. It could be something as small as not getting along at school. It could be
Mm.
something as far as like being in a single parent household. Like, it could be so many small things that add up that do become a norm um, because that's the way that, at least personally me, that's the way that I just, yeah, this is my normal life. This is, we go on about our days, and this is the way that we're going to cope with it. It's just to pretend that, like, there's no healing that needs to be done from it. And then now, as an adult, the more and more that I am stepping into shoes as a wife and to become a mother one day, and also to become as just a chronic pain coach and to heal myself and have a wider capacity of healing for myself so I can hold space for other people around me, whether that's personally or professionally. I understand and I'm seeing, ah, little Amari is, there are certain things that she still pops up in my head or still says, like just takes over my speech.
Mhm.
And the way that I act in certain situations. And I realize, whoa, where did that come from? And whoa, wow, I didn't realize I still needed healing in that area. I didn't realize that that impacted me so much where it's carrying with me years and years later. Whereas before, the coping mechanism that I would have used is, not big of a deal. People have been through worse. Sweep it under the rug. There's so many other things I can be thankful for. I have this support system, but no, like it just in my faith, everyone goes through suffering, like my savior went through suffering. So who am I not to acknowledge my suffering? Who am I not to acknowledge that there can be there's a need for healing and there can be strength through suffering. But in order to find that strength, I have to heal and I have to correct certain mannerisms and certain ways that I respond to others and respond to myself or carry myself in every situation set forward. And I was listening to this podcast here, Tom Bilyeu, and he described it so well. He was saying, you know, when you get in the car and you've been going to the job, going to the same place, like home to the same job 5 years. And sometimes we're driving and then we get to the place and we're like, how did I even get here?
The pilot. Mm-hmm.
Autopilot. And the connection between that and what we're talking about today is, as a child, in the ways that we handle certain situations that harm us, that hurt us, that hurt our feelings, or make us become victims in a certain situation, if we don't heal from it, we go on autopilot. And many times, the hurt and the pain that we inflict on ourselves or put ourselves in certain situations that cause us pain as adults is because we've been on autopilot from childhood. From childhood, we've understood that, oh, I've always been a victim. I'm a victim to the world. I was a victim then, and I became hurt. And maybe there was some type of good response or bad response to it. And it becomes this learning coping mechanism that we don't even notice. It's autopilot. It's in our subconscious mind. It's like, all right, this is the way we reacted to people not liking us. This is the way we reacted to somebody yelling at us. This is the way that we will react such and such. And in turn, when we go through this as adults, we're like, it's been wired in our head for 20 years or maybe even more. And then we wonder, why haven't we healed? Why does this hurt so much? Because it's not just one situation. It's 20 years of situations just like it that are stabbing us, you know, and hurting us physically. Like, that pain becomes physical.
For sure.
More than just emotional and spiritual.
For sure. And
yeah.
And I'm thinking as I'm listening to you, for how long does that go on? And as a father, as a parent, I'm also thinking, oh, how many of these wounds and traumas am I passing on to my kids, right? And here Madeleine's mentioning, yeah, it's not just one situation, for sure, right? It's an accumulation of things. Like I wish it was one situation, right? That would make it so much more easier for us to process it. But as I was listening to you, I was really reflecting on my own experience and what I've inherited, right, as a child, what I've witnessed, what was modeled for me. What was modeled for me, in addition to all the good things and the healthy things that were there, I also, you know, like every single kid, witnessed things that were really unhealthy, emotional responses, ways to address kids. You know, when I grew up, at times, my father was scary at times, right? He didn't mean to, and we've had conversation later on, and him telling, I know you think I was a monster, blah blah blah, and I could tell there was so much pain in his own experience, you know, and for me, my duty as a father is to say that stops with me, because I've seen myself become, at some point, like when I became a father, at some point I was like, why am I dressing this little toddler like I'm going to a bar fight? Like, you know, why is there so much aggressiveness and anger? And I had to check myself and to be like, whoa, what's going on here, right? Because that pattern was being repeated. And so what I'm trying to say here is that, yes, I deserve to heal. I deserve to be more integrated and to get in touch with that inner child. And the question is really, if I don't, then what happens? Because I'm going to be miserable. I'm going to be dragging some burden and weight and emotional stuff, and it's just going to be heavy. Um, but it's also like, how much am I passing on to all the people around me? Like, how much of that crap is influencing all of my relationships? And for me, the most important relationship beside my wife is my kids. And for me to repeat these patterns that really come from that inner child wounds.
Mm-hmm.
And to be more specific here and transparent, me getting scared, for example, I would be like, okay, as a kid, at times I would get really scared. So what would I
Mm-hmm.
do? I would shut down. You mentioned as a kid, like I don't know my values and what I stand for,
Yeah.
and this. You're not supposed to do all of that. You're a kid,
Yeah.
right? And so in many cases, when I got scared as a kid, I would shut down, right? Um, and I've noticed that for a long time, I carried that into my adult relationship because when the voice started to get louder, and I'm assuming some people watching may resonate with that as well. Uh, when the voice started to get louder and it started to get confrontational, I noticed myself shutting down,
Mm-hmm.
right? And again, Madeleine mentioned making the intentional choice to notice and then be like, what do I do? And if
Mm-hmm.
possible, pivot. And I know at times I found
Yeah.
myself stuck there. There was an awareness, right? And we'll talk about maybe next time around like how
Yeah.
potentially to heal that inner child. And awareness is certainly right. Noticing it, acknowledging it is most certainly, as far as I can see it, the first step. But in that moment, what was helpful for me is to notice and to say, really, to acknowledge that, oh, you know what? I'm not, this is not the 30, 35, 40-year-old man, who's responding to my wife right now. It's the scared little Pierre Etienne
Mm-hmm.
who's scared and who doesn't want to, doesn't want to get hurt, who doesn't get yelled at, and so on and so
Mm-hmm.
forth. And so what happened? I would shut down, and just for
Mm-hmm.
me to be able to acknowledge and to kind of go and say, hey, by the way, you're okay, little one. It's not about you right now. I love you. I got your back, right? And allow me right now to respond, right, and to stay in that conversation and to not shut down. And
Yeah.
I know for me, this was and this is hard. This is an ongoing healing process. I don't think there's a time when we're arriving, we're like, oh, that's it, no more. I'm fully healed right now. Um, and yeah, so hard at times. And the compassion, thank you, Madeleine, again. The compassion to
Yeah.
say, oh shit, I'm stuck right now. can
Yeah.
we can we pause, take a
Mm-hmm.
moment? And I know for me, before I was able to stay and to say, okay, let's continue this conversation, at times I had to add strategies that would be more appropriate for me to calm and restore safety for my inner child by just saying, just need a minute here. Just give me 5 minutes. I need to go breathe. I need to go walk. I need to do something because right now I'm just getting, stuck at the top of like just so much activation and my brain is shutting down. And I remember my wife at times saying, you're not listening.
Yeah.
And the truth is, I couldn't.
Yeah.
My little one was too scared. I couldn't
Yeah.
listen. I was not like
Mm.
literally the information came out here, right? For anybody resonating with, arguments with your partners, that's what happens sometimes. If one person is shutting down, there's no exchange, there's no conversation there, right? And so
Mm.
restoring that safety to be able to continue that conversation and come to resolution, I think is important. And therefore, for us to be able to stay in these difficult conversations, I personally feel like I have the responsibility towards my wife, towards my kids, toward the people in my life, to show up able to stay in that conversation, not triggered like a little 5-year-old, right?
Yeah.
And I'm saying that with love, not with judgment, right? That little
Yeah.
5-year-old that was my job. Shutting down at 5 years old, at 5-year-old during a confrontation was the best response. 30 years later, not anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I definitely feel like this is something that we need a part two on. Because Yeah, I mean, even till this day, the same thing, just establishing relationships and maintaining relationships. And everyone has different ways that they've gone through childhood trauma and the way in their values. And when I speak to friends or husband or family, and if anytime there's like this heated conversation, before I realized that I would shut down, really, actually, my physical would shut down, like my throat would
Yep.
close and my chest would tighten, and I would just feel like all the words were a pile of bricks.
Hmm.
And now I'm starting to, well, I've been practicing this like breath work and all these different techniques, and also reaffirming, just like you did, just with a certain mantra, that I am okay. Like, I'm not threatened right now. And that's so, so important in moving forward as an adult, and as a healer, as healing your, as a self healer, whatever. It's it's just a it's a huge tool to have in the toolbox. So let's please continue this conversation again. I don't think it's finished.
No, wait. So let's put a pin in that conversation. Thank you to those of you who contributed. Thank you, Madeleine. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, everybody here. If you have any questions, comment, reflections, please send them to us. And join us next week to continue this conversation. We'll take it from there, and then we'll go into potentially also, what's needed. How, for those of you, I trust those of you watching that right now are probably like, yeah, either doing the work or open to doing the work. And so what to do here? Let me check that comment from Madeleine. Loving this conversation. Big turning point for my own physical and emotional healing has been to check in with myself. Right, that coping mechanism kept me safe when I was younger, but it's not serving me anymore. And here, thank you for sharing that, Madeleine. And here I'll just end it with, again, the words of one of my mentor, and Kevin Duffel from Lumos Transforms, who her voice echoes in my mind again and again, saying, that response is well intentioned, but the timing is off, right?
Yeah.
And it can be the timing in the moment, it can be the timing, as we evolved, as we grow older and hopefully wiser. I think coming to terms and finding peace with ourself, all of ourselves, including that inner child, I think it is a turning point. I agree. It was a turning point for me as well.
Yeah,
Um,
same.
Anything you'd like to mention in closing, Amari?
Yeah, sure. So, yes, please join us next Tuesday again at 8 a.m. for a continuation of this topic. Tonight, I will be holding a chronic pain community gathering that's on Zoom. You can join us by clicking the link in my bio, Body Amore Wellness. It's a totally free group. It's just for people to feel safe, to communicate, and to learn some mind body techniques to process stress and become um, just better with their healing journey. So I hope that you guys can make it to that or next week. Pierre?
Re- Remember to sign up for our Healing Studio online newsletter so you get announcement about upcoming programs, community gatherings, and so on and so forth. Welcome to visit our YouTube channel as well for a recap of the many conversations we've had. Thank you very much, everybody. Be well. Sending love and blessings to everybody. Thank you. We'll see you next
Thank
week.
you. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye bye.